Happy Tuesday! We are going to be starting our official new book, the second in the Chronicles of Narnia series, the one that's after The Magician's Nephew. This is called The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which is the movie that we watched after spring or before spring break. So the last time I saw you guys, we watched the movie. Anyways, the book's a lot better. There are 17 chapters in this book, so today we're going to start off with chapter 1. Chapter 1 is titled Lucy Looks into the Wardrobe. Once there were 4 children whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. This story is about something that happened to them when they were sent away from London during the war because of the air raids. They were sent to the house of an old professor who lived in the heart of the country, 10 miles from the nearest railway station and 2 miles from the nearest post office. He had no wife, and he lived in a very large house with a housekeeper called Mrs. Macready and 3 servants. Their names were Ivy, Margaret, and Betty, but they do not come into this story much. He himself was a very old man with shaggy white hair which grew over most of his face as well as on his head, and they liked him almost at once. But on the first evening when they came out to meet them at the front door, he was so odd-looking that Lucy, the youngest, was a little afraid of him, and Edmund, who was next to youngest, wanted to laugh and had to keep on pretending he was blowing his nose to hide it. As soon as they had said goodnight to the professor and gone upstairs the first night, the boys came into the girls' room and they all talked it over. "We've fallen on our feet and no mistake," said Peter. "This is going to be perfectly splendid. That old chap will let us do anything we like." "I think he's an old dear," said Susie. "Oh, come off it," said Edmund, who was tired and pretending not to be tired, which always made him bad-tempered. "Don't go on talking like that." "Like what?" said Susan. "And anyway, isn't it time you were in bed?" "Trying to talk like mother," said Edmund. "And who are you to say when I go to bed? Go to bed yourself." "Hadn't we all better go to bed?" said Lucy. "There sure is to be a row if we're heard talking over here." "No, there won't," said Peter. "I tell you this, in this sort of house where no one's going to mind what we do. Anyway, they won't hear us. It's all about 10 minutes walk from here down to the dining room, and any amount of stairs and passages in between." "What's that noise?" said Lucy suddenly. It was a far larger house than she had ever been in before, and thought all of those long passages and rows of doors leading to empty rooms was beginning to make her feel a little creepy. "It's only a bird, silly," said Edmund. "It's an owl," said Peter. "This is going to be a wonderful place for birds. I shall go to bed now. I say, let's go and explore tomorrow. You might find anything in this place. Did you see those mountains we came along? And the woods. There might be eagles. There might be stags. Dear, there might be hawks." "Badgers," said Lucy. "Foxes," said Edmund. "Rabbits," said Susan. But when the next morning came, there was steady rainfall, so thick that when you looked out the window you could see neither the mountains nor the woods nor even the stream in the garden. "Of course it would be raining," said Edmund. They had just finished their breakfast with the professor and were upstairs in the room he had set apart for them, a long, low room with 2 windows looking out in one direction and 2 in another. "Do stop grumbling, Ed," said Susan. 10 to 1 it will clear up in an hour or so, and in the meantime we're all pretty well off. There's a wireless and lots of books." "Not for me," said Peter. "I'm going to explore the house." Everyone agreed to this, and that was how the adventures began. It was the sort of house that you never seemed to come to the end of, and it was full of unexpected places. The first few doors they tried led only to spare bedrooms, as everyone had expected that they would, but they soon came to a very long room full of pictures, and there they found a suit of armor, and after that was a room all hung with green, with a harp in one corner. And then they came 3 steps down and 5 steps up, and the kind of little stairs in a hall and a door that led out to a balcony. And then the whole series of rooms that led into each other were all lined with books. Most of them were very old books, and some bigger than a Bible in a church. And shortly after that, they looked into a room that was quite empty except for one big wardrobe, the sort of thing that has a looking glass in the door. There was nothing else in the room at all except a dead blue bottle on the windowsill. "Nothing there," said Peter as they all trooped out again, except Lucy. She stayed behind because she thought it would be worthwhile trying the door of the wardrobe, even though she felt almost for sure it would be locked. To her surprise, it opened quite easily, and 2 mothballs dropped out. Here's a picture of the wardrobe. Now, if you remember, you see their shadows on the ground. If you remember, in the last book, what did Diggory make out of the tree that fell in his backyard? Looking into the inside, she saw several coats hanging up, mostly long fur coats. There was nothing Lucy liked so much as the smell and feel of fur. She immediately stepped into the wardrobe and got in among the coats and rubbed her face against them, leaving the door open, of course, because she knew it would be very foolish to shut oneself into a wardrobe. Soon she went further in and found out that there was a second row of coats hanging up far behind the first one. It was almost quite dark in there, and she kept her arms stretched out in front of her as if to bump her face into the back of the wardrobe. She took a step further, and then 2 steps, and then 3 steps, always expecting to find or feel the woodwork against the tips of her fingers, but she could not feel it. This must simply be an enormous wardrobe, thought Lucy, going still further and pushing the soft folds of the coats aside to make room for her. Then she noticed that there was something crunching under her feet. I wonder, is that more mothballs? She thought, stooping down to feel it with her hand, but instead of the feeling of hard, smooth wood of the floor of the wardrobe, she felt something soft and powdery and extremely cold. This is very strange, she said, and went on to a step or 2 further. Next moment, she found that she was rubbing her face again in hands. The next moment, she found that what was rubbing against her face and hands is no longer soft fur, but something hard and rough and even prickly. Why, it's just like the branches of a tree, exclaimed Lucy. And then she saw that there was a light ahead of her. Not a few inches away from the back of the wardrobe ought to have been, but a long way off. Something cold and soft was falling on her. A moment later, she found herself standing in the middle of a wood at nighttime, with snow under her feet and snowflakes falling through the air. Lucy felt a little frightened, but she felt very inquisitive and excited as well. She looked back over her shoulder, and there between the dark tree trunks she could still see the open doorway of the wardrobe, and even catch a glimpse of the empty room from which she had set out. She, of course, had left the door open, for she knew it would be a very silly thing to shut herself into a wardrobe. It seemed to still be daylight there. I can always go back if anything goes wrong, thought Lucy. She began to walk forward, crunch, crunch, over the snow and through the wood towards the other light. In about 10 minutes, she reached it and found it was a lamppost. As she stood there looking at it, wondering why there was a lamppost in the middle of a wood, and wondering what to do next, she heard a pitter-patter of feet coming toward her. And soon after that, a very strange person stepped out from among the trees and into the light of the lamppost. There's the lamppost. Do you remember how the lamppost got there? If not, you're going to have to go back and listen to the book. He was only a little taller than Lucy himself, and he carried over his shoulder an umbrella, white with snow. From the waist upward he was like a man, but his legs were shaped like a goat's, and the hair on them was glossy black, and instead of feet he had goat's hooves. He also had a tail, but Lucy did not notice this at first because it was neatly caught up over the arm that held the umbrella, so as to keep it from trailing in the snow. He had a red woolen muffler around his neck, like a scarf, and his skin was much rather reddish too. He had a strange but pleasant face, with a short pointed beard and curly hair, and out of the hair there stuck 2 horns, one on each side of his forehead. In one of his hands, as I have said before, he held the umbrella, and the other arm he carried several brown paper parcels, which is like a package. With what the parcels in the snow, he looked like as if he had just been doing his Christmas shopping. He was a fawn, and when he saw Lucy, he gave such a start of surprise that he dropped all of his parcels. "Goodness gracious me!" exclaimed the fawn. And that is the end of chapter 1. You're going to have to come back tomorrow for chapter 2, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis, the second book in the Chronicles of Narnia series. Again, there are 7 books total, and my goal is to get through all 7 books by the end of summer. Book 2, chapter 1. See you guys later. Love and support you.